June 26th, 8 countries quietly pledged allegiance, not to the UN, not to Washington, but to Ibrahim Traoré. Why would India, Turkey, and even Luxembourg align with a revolutionary in West Africa? Let's find out. It began like any other state ceremony. Diplomatic cars pulling into the gravel-lined entrance of Koulouba Palace, uniformed guards standing at attention, aides carrying leather folders with crisp credentials inside. But this wasn't just a meet and greet. This was an alignment, a declaration. And if you looked close enough, you could see it wasn't Burkina Faso entering the world. It was the world entering Burkina Faso. On June 26, 2025, something unprecedented unfolded in the capital city of Ouagadougou. 8 ambassadors, each representing a nation from a different corner of the globe, arrived not just to fulfill protocol, but to formalize a shift in global power relations. Their destination, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Their mission, not to lecture, not to negotiate, but to participate. There were no flashing headlines in global newspapers, no CNN breaking news banner. And yet, in that quiet ceremony, history pivoted. These weren't scattered acts of goodwill. They were simultaneous, synchronized. 8 countries, each acting independently, yet all choosing the same week, the same president, the same palace. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. India's ambassador entered first, his documents tightly clutched. India, one of the largest democracies and economies in the world, had every reason to stay within the safety of G20 circles. But here it was, recognizing not just a government under transition, but one that the West had tried to isolate. A nation that, only months ago, was accused of falling into authoritarianism, was now being embraced by a rising superpower. What has changed? Clearly not Burkina Faso. Something else was shifting. Perhaps the world's center of gravity. Shortly after, Turkey's envoy stepped forward, representing a country that's neither fully European nor entirely Middle Eastern. Ankara has long danced on the edge of Western diplomacy, but this move was different. It wasn't neutral. It was intentional. Turkey wasn't just recognizing Burkina Faso, it was investing in its defiance. The same Turkey that has been testing NATO's nerves now seemed ready to support a government that had expelled French forces and refused IMF oversight. Whatever conversation happened behind those palace doors, one thing was certain: they weren't talking about elections, they were talking about action. Then came Cuba. Symbolically, it felt like a homecoming. Decades ago, Cuban doctors had walked the same African soil as brothers in arms against imperialism. And now, in 2025, Havana was back, not to relive nostalgia but to join a new wave of independence. Cuba's letter wasn't just a credential, it was a salute. It was recognition that Traoré wasn't just leading Burkina Faso, he was leading a mindset. What followed was no less dramatic. Gabon and Equatorial Guinea, both members of the Francophone elite club, broke the unspoken code of silence. For decades, they had stayed comfortably aligned with Paris, but their presence in Ouagadougou suggested something deeper was unraveling. The velvet grip of French influence in Africa was loosening, and these 2 oil-rich states, once gatekeepers of Francophonie, were now sitting across from Traoré, the man who had helped bury it. Sierra Leone's ambassador walked in next, representing a nation still recovering from scars that never fully healed. War, instability, and foreign peacekeeping had defined its recent history. But on this day, Sierra Leone didn't look broken. It looked ready. It didn't come to help. It came to cooperate. Traoré, once viewed as a militaristic anomaly, was now being approached as a post-conflict partner. This wasn't charity. This was recalibration. Then came the quiet surprise: Bangladesh. No fanfare, no political speeches, just calm diplomacy from a country that knows the cost of being underestimated. Bangladesh has climbed out of poverty, built industries from the ground up, and survived climate collapse without a Western lifeline. And now, it was extending a hand, not to save Burkina Faso, but to share survival skills. A silent alliance forged in resilience. Last, and most shocking, was Luxembourg. Not a country known for military might or revolutionary zeal, but for finance, discretion, and deals made behind closed doors. For Luxembourg to show up, alone among EU powers, suggested more than just goodwill. It suggested awareness, perhaps even fear. The kind of fear that comes when you realize the order you helped build is slipping, and your only option is to quietly adapt or be left behind. By the time the 8th ambassador exited the palace, the message was clear. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just building a foreign policy. He was hosting an audition for the New World Order, and 8 countries had just said yes. But what exactly drew them here, to a country once dismissed as poor, unstable, and irrelevant? To understand that, we need to look not at the visitors, but at the man they came for. 8 nations don't just show up in the same week for nothing. Not to a landlocked Sahelian country, not to a captain-turned-president the West once wrote off as a temporary military ruler. So what made these ambassadors board planes and fly to Ouagadougou with documents in hand and intentions unstated? To answer that, you must understand Ibrahim Traoré, not the man in uniform, but the man rewriting what power looks like in Africa. Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. When Traoré first emerged on the global stage in 2022, many dismissed him as just another transitional military figurehead, destined to fade behind a civilian face, one carefully selected to please Western backers. But Traoré refused that script. He didn't just remove the colonial scaffolding, he burned it. What followed was not chaos, but clarity. In a continent used to leaders who tiptoe around Western interests, Traoré walked straight through them. He expelled foreign troops, rejected donor strings, and cut the flow of half-hearted aid with the same steel he used to block insurgent incursions in the north. Yet it wasn't these decisions alone that earned him respect. It was the confidence with which he made them. And confidence, especially African confidence, is contagious. While many saw his actions as provocations, others saw strategy. His defiance was not a reckless leap, it was a precise pivot. He began building what Burkina Faso had been denied for generations, sovereignty that doesn't come with a price tag. By redirecting national priorities from elite deals to public needs, food sovereignty, energy independence, and industrial revival, Traoré made it clear he wasn't playing the West's game. He was playing a new one altogether, one where Burkina Faso would no longer be treated as a staging ground for foreign wars or a dumping ground for expired food aid, but as an equal, capable nation with its compass. That independence didn't repel other nations, it drew them in. Because in a world choking on hypocrisy and contradictions, Traoré represented something deeply rare: consistency. His words matched his actions. He said he wanted African unity, so he signed joint defense pacts with Mali and Niger. He said he wanted industrial dignity, so he invested in domestic manufacturing. He said he wouldn't be a pawn, so he stopped playing on the board altogether. And the world noticed. What makes Traoré even more magnetic is what he represents beyond Burkina Faso's borders. To some, he is the ghost of Thomas Sankara, resurrected, rebranded, and ready for a new century. But unlike Sankara, whose fiery rhetoric alienated even his allies, Traoré operates with cold strategic patience. He doesn't preach, he builds, and the results are impossible to ignore. While many African nations remain tangled in IMF debt traps, Burkina Faso is quietly developing electric bus systems, building food reserves, and restoring state authority in regions once ruled by chaos. Foreign powers, especially those outside the Western orbit, see this and understand the signal. Traoré is not a risk, he is a reset button. His rise provides an opportunity to engage with Africa not as a zone of exploitation, but as a zone of transformation. Countries like India and Turkey recognize that the global center of gravity is shifting, and Traoré is standing at the fault line. For them, aligning with him now is not about sentiment. It's about strategy. Whoever stands with Traoré stands with the future of African autonomy. This also explains why some traditional allies are choosing silence. The West doesn't know how to handle a man like Traoré. He doesn't beg. He doesn't fold. He doesn't throw summits to praise democracy while signing away his country's resources. He simply acts, and those actions make the old powers deeply uncomfortable. Because he's not just rejecting their model, he's building a better one. What unnerves the West most is this: Traoré has nothing to lose. He didn't come from elite political schools. He wasn't groomed for power. He came from the ranks, and that makes him immune to pressure. You can't buy what doesn't want to be sold. And it's not just governments watching him, it's people. Across Africa, young citizens disillusioned with rigged elections and imported ideologies see in Traoré something familiar. Someone who talks like them, walks like them, and fights for what they've always been denied: respect. His growing support across the continent is not built in ballot boxes. It's built in belief. That's what drew those 8 nations to him. Not a title, not an ideology, a force, a momentum, a moment they could either ignore and risk irrelevance or join and shape something new. But now that they've joined him, the question becomes, what are they signing up for? What kind of alliance is this? And what does each country hope to gain? They didn't come for a photo op. They didn't fly into Ouagadougou with empty hands or vague intentions. The 8 nations that aligned with Ibrahim Traoré didn't simply recognize his government. They placed strategic bets. Each one arrived with its vision, its own needs, and its calculations. What unites them is a shared understanding that the old world is crumbling, and Burkina Faso, under Traoré, is offering the architecture for a new one. India's interest was neither sentimental nor symbolic. It was deeply calculated. As one of the world's fastest-growing economies with growing energy demands and a desire to lead the global south, India sees in Burkina Faso both a market and a partner. Traoré's push for rural electrification and solar energy opens a door for Indian companies like Selco and Tata Power to embed themselves in West Africa's green transition. But it goes deeper. India has long struggled to counter China's influence in Africa. By stepping into a nation that has decisively rejected Western hegemony, India positions itself not as a replacement colonizer, but as a collaborator in sovereignty. Traoré provides India with the one thing it has sought in African diplomacy: a non-aligned partner with real local legitimacy. Turkey, meanwhile, came with ambition. Under President Erdogan's leadership, Turkey has rebranded itself as a global connector. Military deals in Africa, trade routes across the Caucasus, and mosque diplomacy in the Sahel. But Burkina Faso is more than just another pin on the map. For Turkey, it's a test case for strategic autonomy. Ankara has long resented the patronizing tone of Europe and the conditional alliances of NATO. In Traoré, Turkey sees a mirror, a leader carving out his own space, building infrastructure without IMF debt, and constructing military capacity without surrendering political will. A Turkey-Burkina Faso axis isn't about ideology, it's about parallel ambition. Both are trying to reshape their regions without external permission. Cuba's interest might seem rooted in nostalgia, but it's far more practical. With its biotech breakthroughs and globally respected medical brigades, Cuba is seeking reliable bilateral partners outside the US-dominated international system. Burkina Faso offers something unique: an ideological ally that won't flinch when Havana is condemned by Washington. In exchange, Cuba can provide what Burkina Faso needs most in underserved regions: doctors, community clinics, and low-cost pharmaceuticals. And unlike Western NGOs, Cuba won't attach clauses about elections or governance reform. It's a trade of trust, not tactics. Then there's Gabon and Equatorial Guinea, 2 countries that once sat comfortably within France's sphere of influence. Their sudden alignment with Traoré signals a regional mutation. They didn't come to the lectures, they came for leverage. These 2 nations are watching how quickly Burkina Faso has taken back control of its gold, how it's drafting its development models without foreign consultants, and how it's negotiating with mining firms from a position of strength. For Gabon and Equatorial Guinea, both rich in oil but tired of profit leakage, Traoré's model offers a radical possibility: resource nationalism that doesn't lead to isolation. They're not walking away from the West because they hate it. They're walking towards something that promises them more control at home. Sierra Leone came with different wounds and different needs. Still recovering from years of war and intervention, it sees Burkina Faso not as a savior, but as a source of lessons. Traoré's success in stabilizing provinces riddled with insurgency, building civilian trust through food programs and local industry, and confronting external pressure without collapse offers a roadmap. Sierra Leone knows instability. But for once, it sees a model of recovery that doesn't involve UN blue helmets or Western-funded reconciliation councils. It sees sovereignty being rebuilt with local hands, not foreign textbooks. Bangladesh entered the room quietly but with clarity. Its presence was not about prestige, it was about pattern recognition. Bangladesh knows what it means to be dismissed, underestimated, and then to emerge as a textile superpower and a microfinance pioneer. It sees in Burkina Faso a version of itself decades earlier. Traoré's hunger to industrialize, his emphasis on women-led agricultural programs, and his curiosity about climate adaptation solutions made Ouagadougou the perfect place to plant a partnership. Bangladesh doesn't offer colonial baggage. It offers practical models for development from the ground up. And then there's Luxembourg, the quietest yet most telling participant. It didn't come with tanks or investments in extraction. It came with development grants, soft diplomacy, and subtle signaling. In doing so, Luxembourg became the first Western European state to cautiously step into Traoré's world on his terms. For a country known for its banking and diplomatic discretion, this move was less about Burkina Faso and more about the European Union. It was a message that even the smallest Western state can read the winds of change and doesn't want to be left behind when African alliances are being reshaped. Together, these 8 nations represent not a bloc, but a blueprint. Their presence wasn't coordinated, but it was convergent. Each has its own goals, but they've all decided to place their bets on a man who isn't following the traditional rulebook. The message is clear. Traoré's Burkina Faso is no longer a diplomatic experiment. It's becoming a center of gravity. Burkina Faso may be the spark, but the fire is spreading. What happened in Ouagadougou on June 26th was not merely about one country gathering new diplomatic ties, it was about the silent awakening of a continent. Traoré's model is no longer confined to his borders. It is being studied, echoed, and in some corners, replicated. The most powerful thing about the Burkina Faso pivot is not that it happened, but that it proved such a pivot is now possible. Across Africa, especially in states long trapped in the spider web of conditional aid and legacy treaties, a quiet reevaluation is underway. Governments that once feared stepping out of Western alignment now find themselves observing a new map of possibility. And they're not just watching Burkina Faso, they're feeling the tremors of its decisions in their halls of power. In Mali and Niger, the impact is already visible. Both nations, also governed by military-led transitions, have followed in Traoré's footsteps by rejecting foreign interference, reclaiming security sovereignty, and establishing joint alliances with one another. But more importantly, these nations have begun to create an informal bloc, not through institutions, but through intent. The AES alliance of Sahel states may still be young, but it is acting as a laboratory for post-West African cooperation. Pooled military strategy, shared infrastructure visions, and plans for a regional currency are all on the table. In a region once fragmented by foreign borders and foreign interests, there's now the outline of unity being drawn from the inside. Further afield, even non-military governments are rethinking the limits of post-colonial diplomacy. Guinea, under Mamadi Doumbouya, has taken a strong position on resource control and foreign contracts, echoing Traoré's hardline on extractive industries. Chad and the Central African Republic are slowly testing the waters of multipolar engagement, increasing dialogue with Russia, China, Turkey, and non-Western financial institutions. These shifts aren't coordinated, but they're not accidental either. Traoré's speeches circulate not as government propaganda but as rallying cries. His image, calm, composed, and unapologetically African, has become an emblem of the future many young Africans want to believe in. In countries like Senegal, Cameroon, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, activist groups and student movements now cite Traoré not just as a figure of resistance, but as a blueprint for governance that puts African dignity first. He has become more than a president. He has become a proof of concept. Even in countries where governments are still tightly aligned with Western powers, cracks are forming. Civil society is more skeptical of European military bases and less tolerant of long-term dependency. From Nairobi to Accra, debates about foreign aid, digital sovereignty, and infrastructure partnerships now come with a sharper tone and a clearer question. If Burkina Faso can do this, why can't we? Demonstrated, is that development can begin with rupture. That saying no is not the end of a country's prospects, but the beginning of its agency. And that is the legacy now unfolding, not as a singular moment, but as a continental direction. Traore's Burkina Faso was the first to turn away without falling. It shattered the illusion that defiance must lead to collapse. Instead, it led to new connections, new partnerships, new diplomacy, and a new sense of what is politically possible. This moment may not yet have a name. There are no slogans, no manifestos. But there is movement, quiet, determined, and now undeniable. What happens next isn't just up to Burkina Faso, it's up to the rest of Africa. Will others follow the sovereignty-first model? Will a new order be built from within, one handshake at a time? Let us know in the comment section, who has the courage to walk through the door Traoré just kicked open? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.